Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 92 of the Thoughtium Virtual Roundtable Series, Navigating Now. We are so excited to come to you all, our community, our family, our friends, our clients, on a week-to-week basis every Thursday at 3 o'clock Central. And you can find all information about previous episodes and future episodes at thoughttium.com/live. You know, we are just so thrilled week over week to bring new perspectives, to go deeper on existing perspective, and more importantly, to highlight those leaders who are at the forefront of some of the most inspiring, challenging, and productive discussions that we're having out there in the workplace and in our lives. And we've got two incredible leaders that we're going to bring to the table today that are not only leaders in their community and their workplaces, but they're just leaders in general. Two individuals that exude leadership in a lot of different ways and have come together to develop a very special project of which we've been able to share in over the course of the last several months. So we're going to bring in Musey and Cabral Clements as part of our Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. But we've been working with Philip and Cabral over the course of the last few months to bring new discussions to our community in some extremely meaningful ways. And so I want to welcome Philip and Cabral to the table. Philip, Cabral, hello. How are you both?
Anthony, doing well. It's a pleasure to be here with the master of ceremonies himself. I know I've been following you do this show for the past couple of years now, and have been trying to convince you to do this full time because you're so good at it. But we'll see. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Absolutely. Cabral, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Super excited for this conversation. Let's get into it.
Good. Yeah, I appreciate you both being here. You know, I joked with Philip and Cabral before we went live. I said, are you getting sick of us yet? Because I really feel like both Philip and Cabral have been almost embedded in the Thoughtium community over the course of really the last couple of weeks. And we're really excited to share how we have partnered to bring new discussions about equity to our community, to our team, and even to our client set. And today's goal is all about is really focused on shedding light on this concept of equity, how we bring new forms of equity to our community, and very tactically, how do we bring discussions of equity in the workplace and to our teams as leaders. It's a big responsibility of ours. I know it's something that so many of us have been very passionate about and very interested in. We've been talking to a lot of DE&I leaders, folks in the community, and people leaders from across small and large organizations that want to know more, that want to be more involved, and that want to challenge, inspire others. And so Philip and Cabral are going to help us today in that discussion. We were brought to Philip and Cabral through their film, The Inventor. And although Philip and the team have a almost 2-year history of working together in partnership, Philip and Cabral really came to us with this film that they were developing that really does set the tone and is an incredible depiction of bringing equity to the forefront of our discussions. And they do it through this beautiful short film that they are taking to a lot of different communities. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But first and foremost, Philip, Cabral, I would love for you both to say hello and tell our community a little bit about you as an individual and maybe even you as a leader. Philip, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Thanks once again, Anthony, for having me on the show. I am, I guess by way of introduction, I started my career in innovation strategy consulting. And what I spent most of my time doing was help leaders at large companies connect their DEI strategies to their growth strategies. We worked with leaders in many different fields, telecom, media, healthcare, you name it. And I really enjoyed those conversations because it was almost sort of like moving someone from one headspace to another in the most sort of delicate and nuanced way. It was very challenging work, but it sort of set me on the course of wanting to bring discussions around DE&I to organizations in a way that feels a little less, I use the word programmatic, or a little less procedural, And so, I use my background as a storyteller, someone who's loved writing for, his entire life, have written, many different, scripts over the past several years, feature films, television pilots, plays. And it just felt like this film was an opportunity to advance, a discussion around DEI in a really special way. So, again, really appreciate the opportunity to bring it to the Thought Team community. And I guess I'll pass the mic over to Cabral.
Thanks, Philip, and thanks, Anthony, for having us and letting us sit down with your community. I am Cabral. I live in Atlanta. I'm from Atlanta. I'm a storyteller. I've been spending most of my time, since graduating college, telling stories. I worked at Delta for a bit, Delta Airlines, where I was in the communications department, and just telling stories around the airline community. Just so everybody knew what was going on. About 2 years ago, I shifted and focused more on education, where I am telling stories and creating content for a number of education organizations. And for fun, we make short films.
For now,
yeah, and
eventually,
for fun is a huge understatement. As I even heard about both of your backgrounds, your interests, your experience, I get an even deeper understanding of why this short film is so great and so effective. Because I don't think that it could have come from folks that maybe didn't have the backgrounds that you do and the passion that you both have in telling stories, in creating meaning through content. And also, being on almost your own kind of individual self-discovery journey. And so, you both came together to co-produce this film, and it is called The Inventor. Inventorfilm.com is where you learn more about the film. Our team had the sheer opportunity of both previewing the film and also having several discussions internally that really allowed the film to be a launching pad for us to go deeper in discussions that we were already challenging ourselves with. But this gave us almost a 12 to 15 minute artifact for us all to individually and collectively relate to really shift some of the energy and challenge biases or even underlying biases that might occur in even the way that we're structuring our conversations about DE&I. And it became almost this tool for us to open up. So much so that I know that when we came back to the table with both of you, there was a few of us that were almost emotional about, how this film can just open conversation in such incredible ways and even induce, layers of feeling that you might have based on your own experiences. And so first and foremost, I want to congratulate you both on just an incredible film and the impact that it's had, however small, I would argue extremely large on our team. And I wonder, if we can get into the discussion a little bit by, Philip, I know that this film was something that, came to you 2020, so just a couple years ago, and a lot has been accomplished to put it together and to write it and to film it. Tell us a little bit about the process of this film, how the concept and the inspiration came to you, and where are you going with it today?
Yeah, well, I think Cabral is incredibly well equipped to talk about the origin story. He was actually the one who brought the concept to me years ago. But just personally, 2020 was a rough year for everyone. It was an incredibly traumatic time on a lot of levels. For me personally, I had recently moved back to Atlanta from New York, and in the wake of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, I'm someone who runs all the time. I was just really shaken by the fact that Black lives could be taken and have been taken systematically and sort of indiscriminately for hundreds of years. And then you add on to that, of course, the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. Summer was just a really difficult sort of emotional reckoning. And like I usually do, I tend to turn to writing to think through and process world events. And what I think I was really searching for in writing this story and returning to it was confirmation that the lives of Black people in America are not inconsequential. I have just been so incredibly inspired by the example that Garrett Morgan left me personally, right? Like we don't even have time to talk about how his example may have affected everyone who's seen this, but like as the writer, I just find such a treasure trove of new inspiration and sort of motivation to keep going. The more I learn about Garrett, the more I learn about the obstacles that he overcome, the fact that his parents were born into slavery, and he moved to Ohio and created opportunities for himself, regardless of the barriers that he was facing. The last thing I'll say there is, we had a chance to meet with Sandra Morgan, Garrett Morgan's granddaughter, who is sort of the protector and the keeper of his legacy. And there was one quote that she shared with us that Garrett always used to say: when you face obstacles, you can either go around it, you can either go over it, or if those two fail, you can go through it. And that was like 2 months ago. So that's just an example of how, like, the more I learn about Garrett and get closer to his story, the more inspired by it I become, and really hoping to turn it into a longer piece.
Yeah. I love that. And Cabral, I'd love to have you just talk a little bit about Garrett Morgan and the story of Garrett Morgan, and maybe how it came to you, and then how did you go to Philip with that story?
Yeah, so it started elementary school around the second grade, actually. And I got a project during Black History Month. Everybody had had a person that they had to do a report on, and mine was on Garrett Morgan. So I took that. I learned a lot about Garrett Morgan. Actually built a traffic light, out of a shoebox and some cardboard and some little electrical components that I had laying around.
Because he invented the traffic light.
Exactly. So the traffic light, the gas mask, amongst other things. And that story just stuck with me throughout the entire time. And I, continued to do a little bit of research into Garrett Morgan. And I thought this needs to be a film. Biopics are things that I like to watch, I like to consume. So it's something that, I want to see. I think it was around 2017-ish. Philip was in New York, and then he, wrote a script, and he had a table read, and I happened to be in New York at the same time. I went up and went to the table read, and I saw how much of a genius Philip's writing was. And then, no, it was great writing, and still is. And then a few years later, we finally had the opportunity to get the script to a point where we were comfortable shooting it. And then I saw how much of how genius he is as a director as well. So I just brought the story to Philip, and he graciously agreed to collaborate, to make it happen.
Yeah. I want to get into a little bit of the format, because I don't watch a lot of short films. A couple weeks ago, I went and saw, Top Gun 2, and that's how I was raised. I mean, we watched the big, mega films, anywhere between an hour and 45 and 2.5 hours. There's a very specific plot line that follows. You can expect a certain type of emotion, a denouement, and some sort of resolution. I think what is so effective about this film is that, here Garrett Morgan is a lifelong leader, an inventor, an entrepreneur, an incredible African-American influence, and somebody who lived his entire life with a purpose, and just so happened to invent some incredible things, life-saving things, the stop sign, the gas mask, and other personal products that, we use every day today. And you all took the task of finding a very specific moment in his life and putting that in a 14-minute film. And as much as, mentally I go into watching a 14-minute film thinking that I'm going to get like a snippet or a cross section, what you get is so much deeper, because you really are challenged to absorb the emotion of the conversation that Garrett is having with his dissenting brother, and some would call dissenting, or his brother who has maybe a little bit of a different personality and wants to really, really challenge the fact that they're not being recognized. And it's this conversation that happens, that could happen any day between siblings, and back then a conversation that happened at a real inflection point of Garrett's kind of entrepreneurship. How did you decide on that format, and how did you consider a short film to have such responsibility of telling such an incredibly robust story of Garrett Morgan?
We would have started with the feature if we could, right, Philip?
Yeah, we wish
it's as simple as that, right?
Yeah, money was we only had enough for 14 minutes versus an hour and 45. But that's an amazing question, Anthony. I don't think we've quite gotten that before. I mean, to address the decision to cover one moment in Garrett's life, like you mentioned, I mean, Garrett was the inventor of many different solutions over the course of his life. He was completely self-taught. He had, I think the most amount of schooling he had was a fifth grade education. Initially, what we wanted to do was, I think Cabral and I had always been really fascinated with this 1916 Cleveland waterworks tunnel explosion, because it's just such a visually striking moment in his life. And initially our hope, back in 2017, like the first versions of the script that we were sending back and forth, was Garrett like actually descending into this tunnel, which he did, right? Like he and his brother risked their lives to go half a mile underground and save these men who were trapped. Obviously, like pyrotechnics and that sort of, those massive pieces are very expensive. So I think what the film became was just like an examination of the psychology of Garrett, and by extension, the psychology of Black entrepreneurship. That is incredibly relevant today. I think something like 1.2% of venture capital funding that was allocated in 2021 went to Black founders. So it's not a new concept that inventors of color struggle to be seen with the credibility and recognition that they need to advance their careers. What we wanted to do in the film was look at what that looked like 100 years ago. And I think our Keith Arthur Bolden, who played Garrett in the film, did an amazing job to sort of going to that place. And I don't think that it was that hard, because these are the emotions that you see that Garrett is portraying on screen are the same emotions that, I'm sure Keith has had. I'm sure, Cabral and I have had going into spaces where we felt traditionally like a little bit less, more marginalized. But that's the exciting work. The task is to continue to like we're discussing today, make more equity, create more equity in all types of spaces.
I want to get your thoughts, Cabral, on the format, but I want to maybe deposit this, because Philip, I didn't know. I just love these like new nuggets about how you all were considering alternative scenes or moments, right, in Garrett's life, and what an incredible life. There's a million of them, and so you would think, let's call it budget, resources, time aside, like the most obvious, the most intuitive would be that moment where he's descending upon a life-threatening situation, putting his invention in front of his name, his likeness, even maybe his reputation, or his own sense of self. And you would think that would be the obvious scene, but it's funny because as you mentioned that, my reaction was, I wouldn't want it any other way than to see the actual discussion that he had with his brother the next day. And the reason why is because I think for us less historically and currently less marginalized folks, we can see that conversation as a conversation that we might be having every day. And we can see that there's a real juxtaposition between the conversation that Garrett is having with his brother and the conversation I would be having with my twin sister. So I can draw the commonalities of just the platonic tension between brother and sister, but you apply that to something as just deep and rich as his brother, who wants them to fight for their name, and Garrett, who wants to show progress. And I just don't know if that could be achieved in a more whimsical kind of high budget scene where he's putting his life on the line, which is just as important. But the relatability of this scene is what just absolutely got to the depths of me and how I watched it. And Cabral, I don't know if you've got anything to add or any thoughts on that, just in terms of the format and the moment that you both picked, because I just think it's genius.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of evolution with the scripts, right? It started, like Philip said, us really wanting to capture him putting his own invention on, right? The invention that wasn't selling because it was a Black inventor, but him and his brother put his own invention on and then went down to, what is essentially a death hole to save people and to recover bodies. And that's, like you said, he put his name on the line, he put his reputation on the line, he put his life on the line, but put put his invention in front of that. But he believed in it so much. So of course that's important. And I think the dialogue after the fact of Frank trying to get him to understand how important and how essentially unfair it was that he didn't get the recognition that he deserved because of that sacrifice. I think that was the natural next step. But that conversation, regardless of how we go forward in making a series or making a feature film or even a play, we're always going to have that conversation in there because it's just so important.
Yeah. Again, this is just an incredible opportunity. This film, this discussion is such an incredible opportunity to bring more of these dialogues to our communities. And more specifically to our business world. This show is and our community is largely made of business leaders, so many of whom are just have really expanded themselves, all colors, all creeds, all nations, of individuals, business leaders that are trying to bring this discussion to their teams, to their organizations in ways that makes it not just a discussion, but that potentially inspires actual movement and change. And so I'm curious, how have you both, the story of Garrett Morgan into environments, organizations, communities of people, and what are some of the discussions that you're having around it?
Well, sure, I'll go first. We've brought this story to businesses that have tens of thousands of employees and organizations with, nonprofit organizations with just a few hundred kids. Like we've shown this at film festivals, and in just the short time that we've been able to put this short film on. And I think it always just spurs a conversation, and it's not always intentional where we want that conversation to go. But we know the themes of the film. There's themes of diversity. There's themes of persistence. Obviously Garrett Morgan was somebody who went around it, over it, or through it. And we continue to speak towards those themes. And those are things that people can relate to, no matter if they're high schoolers. We did a screening with 21st Century Leaders. That's where Philip and I actually met. Or if it's, Fortune 500 organizations.
Yeah, I love that. And, Philip, one of the discussions that we've had around this is the difference between equality, which is a term that we use a lot, and equity. And I'd love to have you comment on some of the dialogue that we've had on the difference between the two, and how we've been able to kind of relate the film and the story of Garrett to really focusing on equity as the benchmark.
Yeah. So the first thing that I would say is equity is for everyone. The next thing that I would say is the sort of etymological difference between the word equality and equity is means everyone gets the same thing. Equity means everyone gets what they need. And the way that we sort of brought the concept of equity to life in the film, I think, shines through this dynamic between Garrett and Frank. And this is sort of how we framed it with the organizations that we've spoken with, but Garrett and Frank have very different orientations to the same problem. And the same way that team members on any team in any organization, or with, to your point, Anthony, within, siblings within a family, can have different viewpoints. But, in this day and age, organizations talk a lot about innovation, for example. Well, I think the reality is no organization can have an innovative bias without creating space for everyone to have space at the table. And I think, without giving too much of the film away, but I think the argument between Garrett and Frank really starts to highlight is that Garrett is creating equity for his brother Frank, and the same way that Claude is creating equity for Garrett. And I think that the magic in sort of how those themes show up is the fact that we kind of did that unconsciously. It wasn't like we were like reading a DEI dictionary and asking ourselves, well, how exactly do we insert the concept of equity? It's only after the fact that we have sort of been able to take a step back and examine how all of the characters interact, that we've realized that this is a really great blueprint to show anyone watching this film that they have the power to make sure that everyone on the team has what they need to succeed. And that could mean something very different for every person. And then I think the last thing that I would say, I'll pause, is that the absence of equity has an economic cost. If you think about the fact that Garrett had to hire a white actor to portray himself, and in order to gain the credibility to enter that room, if he hadn't had to do that, think about how many more lives could have been saved that night at the tunnel explosion, because it was only after a few hours that the tunnel disaster was going on that the fire chief literally called the rescue off, and one of the fire lieutenants picked up the phone and said, and called Garrett and his brother and asked to come as a last ditch effort to bring those hoods down. If Garrett had been operating in an environment that saw him for who he was and his brilliance, a lot more lives likely would have been saved. And so how can we translate that same dynamic into current present day situations?
Yeah, I love that. Again, so much to unpack with this film and the discussion that follows. I just love also really exploring and examining the difference between equity and equality. And again, sometimes we just love to kind of boil things down and simplify things. In this case, I think it matters to repeat that. In this case, equality is where everybody gets the same thing. Equity is where everybody gets what they need. And that absolutely can be seen in this film. But I think we can also all relate as leaders. We have had to expand our ability to hold space for different needs of individuals on our team and in our larger organizations in ways that we never have had before. And unfortunately, it took a global pandemic for us to start to create that space. But I wonder if kind of the convergence of the last 3 or 4 years and everything that's been happening in the world with the racial injustice, with the pandemic, with some of the broader kind of political social conversations that we're having, it really is challenging us as leaders to create new space. And that was another conversation that we've had with our team. And, Cabral, I'd love for you to just comment on we talked about this simplicity sometimes of just creating the space for people to bring their entire self in, and for them to be able to comfortably and in a safe way, communicate their needs. And sometimes that's the hardest thing for us to do as leaders. So tell us a little bit about the role of just simply creating this space in a world where we're trying to drive more equity as opposed to equality in this case.
Yeah, I think we did a very good job of, or the Thought team did a very good job of creating the space at the dinner that we had just a few days ago, where we brought community leaders together and we just kind of talked about the film. I think the space can actually be a physical location, or it could kind of just be like a mindset. Creating the space could just mean welcoming new ideas. Again, without giving too much of the film away, Frank's attitude towards what should be deserving for Garrett and for Frank was, a bit on the abrasive side, some would say. But Garrett welcomed those ideas. Garrett even welcomed him into the space, even if it was him thinking he was going to be somebody else. It's still his brother. They're on the same team. So it's not really Team Garrett or Team Frank. They're on the same team. That goes, that's the same thing for organizations or for companies. Welcoming people into the space, hearing their ideas, creating that space for diverse thought, which creates a space for innovation.
You talked about holding physical space, and I know that's something that we're starting to do more and more of. And you had referenced the Create the Space dinner that we hosted just this past Sunday. We were so fortunate to see the kind of byproduct of just sharing space with others, this type of conversation. And yes, at Thought Team, we believe in designing and delivering great experiences. It's in the DNA of what we do. And we were so excited to curate this experience for our community and our clients. But what happened on Sunday evening, I just don't think could happen without a certain sense of just organic openness to come together as people. So yes, we had a beautiful space. We screened the film, which was just incredible to physically sit alongside a group of diverse leaders and watch the film together. And we held at least a couple hours of open space for folks to both relate to the content and even relate to the characters, to ask some big questions like, what is the difference between equality and equity, and how are we driving both of these concepts within organizations? And also just to connect, which again, we're at a bit of a deficit with in terms of that kind of face-to-face. And the Create the Space dinner, particularly last Sunday, in my opinion, was just one of the most fruitful and beautiful culminations of, bringing incredible leaders like yourself in to help us create the space for others, to call on different corners of our kind of blended community, albeit a group, to come together. And it's interesting. I almost immediately wanted to say, hold each other responsible. That wasn't it at all. We were celebrating our ability to open the space. And it didn't feel at all like a structured discussion. There was no topic that we felt like we needed to put at the center of the table. We truly just opened the space. And I think the tool that allowed us to do that the most was the film. And it really has challenged us, even as designers of these experiences, to think about really unique ways to create space as leaders. And this kind of like really well done, very deep and meaningful kind of small artifact, almost immersive experience of watching the film, bringing these concepts in, relating them almost to yourself personally, prior to sitting at a table with your team and other leaders. there was just something really, really strong about that. I mean, I've now watched this film probably 7 or 8 times, and every time it evokes a different emotion. And I want to come back to the table with Norm and Amanda and Grift and Molly and Lila and all of our team and have that discussion. And that's, what we saw on Sunday. You both were just such a big part of it. And I couldn't be more proud of you two, and more so of the partnership that you've had with Thoughttium. You really have given us the gift of not only meaningful discussion, but real inspiration to continue to drive these conversations in our community, and more importantly, continue to find ways to get better and to be better at our craft. And I want to thank you both for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Anthony. I in the past couple of days, just reflecting on how the dinner went. I don't think I've quite had an experience like it, and I mentioned this when we were planning that. I just think that there's so much merit and there's so much to be gained by doing what we did on Sunday. That it doesn't happen enough. So I'm so proud to have had a chance to be part of it, and I hope that we can make another appearance one day soon.
You will, because I will tell you, even just in this last week, we've thought a lot about how we are designing pathways for leaders. We do a lot of work in the leadership development space and the training space, and we are helping organizations really elevate how they think about creating learning experiences and individual and team development experiences. And not only the format of this, which I just think has really also been so inspiring for us, but the gateway kind of conversation being one of just real depth is something that I think this experience has really challenged us. And I don't know if we'll ever think about creating just another personal development pathway without bringing a certain element in from what we've experienced with you all over the last couple of weeks. And so, Philip, Cabral, thank you so much. I know this is really just the beginning of our partnership with you, but I also know that you're doing some incredible work, beyond our community. And I know you're doing kind of some roadshow and having some of these discussions in other organizations and other communities. So tell our community how you're working with other communities and how they can find you if they want to get in touch.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned earlier in the show, inventorfilm.com. That's our website. That's where anybody can go and reach out to us, have a conversation, because we love these conversations. But that's also where you can go and book a time for us to come in virtually or in person to show the film for your organization and then have a discussion afterwards. There's also some film festivals that are coming up soon. The Manhattan Film Festival, obviously in New York, and the Martha's Vineyard Film Festival that's happening in August. And we'll keep that website updated with any other film festivals that we get into.
Wonderful. Really, really appreciate the time today. Thank you for making Create the Space Dinner 002 just one for the books. The bar is absolutely set. And we're just so thrilled to have you a part of the community. So thank you both for joining. And I want to thank our entire community for stepping into the conversation today. Hopefully you learned a little bit. Hopefully you're also just inspired to think about both from a dialogue perspective and a format perspective, how to bring new conversations to your team, because that's what I think we as leaders are all about. And we're just thrilled to have everybody tuning in on a week-to-week basis. You can find all of our content at thoughtteam.com/live. We go live every Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Central, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Have a wonderful rest of the week.